Welcome back to Music Student 101. I say welcome back because I assume you've already given episode 34, Counterpoint Part 1, a good listen. If not, we insist you do. If so, put on your scuba gear and dive deeper into counterpoint with certified instructors Jeremy Burns and Matthew Scott Phillips.
Matt.
Jeremy.
You know, this might have to be a three-parter.
It's a lot. It's a lot, and it's a lot of rules. It's a lot of stuff.
Let me say this: it was just Thanksgiving.
It was just Thanksgiving, still full of turkey.
I guess a week ago since you guys heard it, but I want to tell you that I am thankful for music.
I am very thankful for music, without which I would not have a career or happiness in my life. Or
I'm thankful for counterpoint, but I'm a little resentful of all the rules that it takes to get to the point where you can actually write decent counterpoint.
Yeah, it can be very frustrating. It's a frustrating skill to try to master.
How did you like that intro music?
I liked it very much. It sort of reflected my frustration with counterpoint, I think.
Well, actually, I decided I kind of wanted to wake everybody up, so I figured I'd compose a bumper track that started off with a jarring diminished chord. This has really nothing a lot to do with counterpoint. But if you go back and listen, you'll hear that first chord is a D diminished.
Well, there's where the frustration came from, right there, right?
Yeah, it's just started off, but it went from a 2, 5, 1 in minor key.
Okay, so diminished triad on the second scale degree to 5 to 1. Nice.
I just kind of came up with that, and then I got my friends Jerome Chapman on the guitar, and then Brian Malloy, my go-to drummer, to come in and make it awesome.
Very, very nice. Yeah, it was awesome, and completely in an incomplete defiance of Renaissance counterpoint rules, which I applaud.
Now, I would like to play you something that maybe actually features a little bit of counterpoint.
Excellent. Can't wait to hear it.
I have my guitar here.
Okay.
All right, let's see if I can make my way through this. What? Do you recognize that at all, Matt?
I would say play it again, but I don't.
Well, if you don't recognize it, there's a perfectly good reason, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because us Americans aren't terribly well versed in the national anthems of other nations.
That is true. That is true. Which nation was that?
That would be the great nation of Thailand.
Nice. Very, very nice. And a great example of a comparison and contrast to our opening music, one of which defiantly ignores some of the basic rules of counterpoint, and another example that sort of conforms to the rules of counterpoint. And in our modern day ears, we don't have this, well, one sounds terrible and the other one sounds good kind of distinction anymore, right? Because we hear so much stuff. Mm-hmm. Terrible isn't, we don't think of it in the same way. But it definitely can give us an example of the kind of music you can write by defying counterpoint rules versus the kind of music you can write and play by knowing them and conforming to them, mm-hmm. right? So, if you thought that anthem of Thailand was very pretty and sounds like the kind of thing you would like to be able to pull off, well, stay tuned. Right?
Indeed. Hey, aren't you curious as to why I'm using specifically the music of Thailand? The national anthem of Thailand?
I probably ought to be. I don't have enough caffeine to be curious yet, but...
That was only a medium. I guess we should have gotten a large. Huh? Check it out. So, Thailand is neck and neck with Australia for our greatest number of downloads.
Really?
Now, of course, we have the United States and Canada, which is the mainland, of course. you know?
Yeah.
And then we have the UK
Uh-huh.
and Australia, all English-speaking countries.
Right, yeah.
But all of a sudden, we have Thailand neck and neck with Australia,
Wow.
which is not, they speak a majority Thai, I believe. So
That's pretty incredible. Thank you all for listening.
yes, this is kind of our little tribute to you guys. This and hey, Thailand audience, our Thai buddies, you can actually write us and let me know how bad I'm butchering these names. This was written in 1932. This is called Playing Chat Thai. This was composed in 1932 by a person named Phra Chanduriang, which is actually Thai for skilled with musical instruments. He was
Nice.
He was actually born Peter Fate. His dad was German American and his mom was Mon Thai, which is Burmese. But I guess because he spent most of his time in Thailand, he identified himself pretty much as Thai. Now, when you heard that, just the melody, I know I didn't do it justice on the guitar entirely, but when you heard that, did you hear any particular influence?
Well, it sounded very Western.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like traditional Thai music might.
No.
It sounds a lot more kind of European.
In fact, this was supposedly inspired by Brahms' Symphony No. 1.
Oh, wow.
So, his dad being German, I guess he had
I guess so, yeah.
some exposure to some of that music. And his dad was a musician as well.
Yeah.
So, all that to also say, we want to say thank you to the good people of Thailand for listening to our podcast.
Thank you, good people of Thailand.
And let us know why and how you became the country that is so neck and neck with all these other English-speaking countries. How did you hear about us?
Yeah, you guys rock. Look at that.
Hey, you know what I like? You know what I love? Screw left, screw right, screw politics, screw war. Screw all these petty differences we have amongst ourselves in these countries of the world. And let's come together and talk about something we all love. And that brings us all together a little bit more. And
Indeed.
I think we can say this is one way that music is bringing the world together, just a little bit.
Just a little
If
bit.
not just by a little bit.
And that's kind of its job. I think this is sort of part of the reason we have music and all art. Yeah.
So, real quick, I'm going to show you how this song kind of features a little bit of counterpoint.
Okay.
So the first opening, it starts off on unison. So we have the beginning of the phrase, ba, 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 and then the parallel thirds take over. So and they continue. And then we're back on unison at the end of the phrase. So very similar thing to what we were talking about. I mean, it seems like some of the base rules of counterpoint that we've already been talking about have been well observed.
Yeah.
During the writing of this.
Yeah. Interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Very fascinating stuff. Yeah. I can hear it being inspired by Brahms because it's definitely more like a 19th century idea of counterpoint. With all the parallel thirds. Yeah, I could definitely see that.
Very cool.
All
anyway,
right.
Thank you, Thailand. We love you.
Thank you, Thailand. We love you.
So that was fun. Now it's time to get to some more of the difficult and painful.
Yes.
We shouldn't set it up like that. But we're being honest.
We can't lie to the people. Look,
this
can be difficult stuff. People used to spend all of their lives truly mastering. This is what mastering music was in the Renaissance and into the early Baroque era. This is what becoming a great composer, or becoming a great organist, or something. This is what that meant. Is learning these rules. So to try to pile all of them onto you in the course of a single semester, as many schools do, is actually, frankly, pretty ridiculous. To try to pour them all on you in the space of 1, 2, or even 3 podcasts, frankly, ridiculous. We understand.
Almost a little cruel.
Yeah. But take heart in the fact that we there's some takeaways from some of this, and if you never become Palestrina, that's probably okay, as long as you pick up some of these takeaways, just about how chords evolved and how to write two melodies at once and have them be distinguishable from each other.
Right, independent.
Right? And that's a good skill to have, especially even in this day and age, as evidenced by our Thai composer who wrote the national anthem there.
Right.
All right.
So, just a quick recap of what we did in the part one of this episode. We discussed, basically, we defined counterpoint.
Right.
Like you said, as the fine art of combining two or more melodic lines, having each of them maintain a certain level of independence.
Right.
Where they could stand alone if they needed to, right?
Good definition.
And we also wrote a cantus firmus. Now, what is a cantus firmus again, real quick?
A cantus firmus is a single melodic line off of which melodies are written, against which melodies are written in counterpoint. In terms of real music in the Renaissance, and in particular, they were often Gregorian chant melodies, things that were pre-extant.
Yeah.
And then the composers would write counterpoint melodies on top of those to create, Renaissance masses and things. But it is basically our first line, our line that's not going to change as we write counterpoint on top of it.
Right. Very good. So we came up with our own.
We did.
And that was plenty for that first episode.
That was plenty, because there were a lot of rules, right? Go back and listen to that episode, but there were a lot of things we could and couldn't do in terms of writing our own cantus firmus. And you guys may remember the end result here kind of went something like this.
D Dorian, right up and down, kind of.
Right up and down, right. Has a distinct zenith.
Yeah.
Right. Largely stepwise motion. Did I leap at all? It doesn't look like it.
Not hugely.
Yeah. So that's what we had.
Very nice.
Yes. So now we get to the point. You hear the silence as I'm trying to. It's like diving off the high dive.
I'm not going to edit that one out, but I'm going to edit a lot more of those out. It's going to be a lot of pauses while we.
There's going to be a lot.
Probably some cursing.
So, all right. So at this point, we begin to start saying, well, how do we write counterpoint over that melody? How do we write another melody on top of that and still have them both make sense? And remember, we said this last time, and it will hold true for as long as we talk about counterpoint, that this is kind of a laboratory-like setting.
Right.
What we're trying to do here is sort of, in a way, control for the experiment so that we can learn some fundamental things about how notes go together in this type of music. And the first thing we're going to do when we do that is what we've eventually come to call first species counterpoint, which means we are going to add a note of the same note value to each note of our cantus firmus. So the notes in our cantus firmus and the notes in our melody, 1-to-1 ratio, right? There is a note in the melody for a note in the cantus firmus the whole time.
Yes.
We're doing that for the very important reason that we are, think that this is sort of a laboratory. It's like, well, how does note against note work? Out in real music, when notes have a 1-to-1 ratio like that, like, for example, when Bach is just playing eighth notes in two lines, let's see if I can, they're going to tend to obey these rules that we learn here in first species counterpoint.
Oh, speaking of which, maybe we should just give them prime our listener a little bit for what's gonna happen here.
Okay.
Because in this episode, I think we've gone ahead and decided this is going to be a 3-part episode.
This is going. Yeah, I think we've decided that there's plenty of. Yeah, so we'll come back to this later.
So we're going to spend the first half of this building a first species counterpoint, which is what we're already talking about,
Which
right?
is what we're doing now.
And then we're going to take a quick little break for ourselves. And then come back and do second species after the break.
Yeah, because your favorite composer is going to need a second to do to write a second. All right, but all right.
Continue.
So, there are a couple of things when we're writing this top melody that is a little bit more tolerated than they were when we were writing the cantus firmus. Leaps can be followed by another leap so long as they're either outlining a triad or if that second leap is in the opposite direction.
Okay.
That's okay. Some people will tolerate a repeated note so long as it's only repeated once. Now that's probably, you get into this area where it's okay, but it's not quote-unquote good. Mm-hmm. It's not quote-unquote the best. So there are some things that are a little more tolerated, but then there are some things that we still want to avoid, right?
Okay.
In matching our notes with the cantus firmus, we want to use only consonant intervals.
Okay.
No dissonances, right? So consonant intervals mean a perfect fifth or a perfect octave, a minor or major third, or a minor and major sixth.
Okay.
No seconds.
No seconds.
No sevenths.
No sevenths.
No fourths.
Ah.
Considered a dissonance.
Right.
Believe it or not. So we use only consonant intervals. A perfect unison, meaning both of the melodies on the same note, it can happen at the beginning or it can happen in the end.
Not unlike the national anthem of Thailand we just listened to.
Absolutely, right, yeah. It can happen at the beginning or the end. Usually considered not good if it happens in the middle.
Right.
Now some people will give you more slack than others on that. But in general, we don't like for that to happen in the middle. Because remember, these are supposed to be two distinct melodies. So if they're both on the same note, in the middle of the melody, then that's going to sort of compromise that a little bit.
I think it delivers the effect that one of the voices disappeared.
Right, yeah, it's a good way to put it. Yeah, it delivers the effect that one of the voices disappeared.
Just dropped out of note, just dropped off.
Right,
the face of the page.
So perfect intervals, the unison, the fifth, the octave, should only be approached by contrary or oblique motion. No parallel fifths, which we have talked about before, right?
Right.
No direct fifths, which we have talked about before. Same thing for parallel and direct octaves.
Okay.
And parallel and direct unison don't even... Then you just got one melody, right?
Right. And
just get out of town with that.
Just a quick review for those who are bold enough to listen to this without listening to part one. Just a quick review on the types of motion. We have 4 types of motion, right?
Right.
Parallel is moving basically stepwise.
Right.
Holding the exact same...
but with the exact same interval.
With the exact same interval. Similar motion is kind of a similar... It follows the contour very much, but it's not perfect by interval.
Right. Yeah, they're both moving in the same direction, but by different intervals.
Contrary motion, we have 2 lines moving in the opposite direction.
Right, and that's your friend.
That's your friend. That's like the big buddy, right?
Yeah.
Now, oblique motion, how is that different from contrary motion?
It is the one where they are moving in the same direction from an interval to a fifth or an octave. So from a minor third to a perfect fifth. And usually also considered bad unless one of those voices is moving by step.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. So there you go.
Supposing I should like to use a parallel unison right about here.
Don't get out of town with that, right?
Pat is making a real mean face at me.
Parallel fifths, no good.
Uh-huh.
Parallel octaves, no good, right? Even when, and on top of that, these perfect intervals, unisons, fifths, and octaves, they're not great in the middle of the melody, even when approached by contrary motion. So even, contrary motion is definitely your friend, but even when you're that in the middle of the line, kind of not great.
Okay, so we had 2 notes.
Yeah.
Fairly wide apart.
Yeah, and they went down into a perfect fifth. One went up, one went down.
Right, the higher one went down, the lower one went up, and you landed on a perfect fifth.
Kind of not good.
Kind of not good.
In first species counterpoint, kind of not. Remember, we're learning here how these notes go together, right? Remember, it's a laboratory.
Mm-hmm.
It's a laboratory. What we're learning is that is not a great sound.
Right.
Because those perfect fifths are so close to each other, frequency-wise, it's a 3-to-2 ratio in the frequencies, right?
Uh-huh.
That your ear doesn't distinguish those as two separate notes well enough to still say, well, these are two melodies going on.
So it almost has that same effect as what you would get if there was a unison all of a sudden.
Almost.
Almost,
yeah.
okay.
Not better enough for us to really feel good about doing it. Again, some people will give you a certain amount of slack for doing that if it's approached and left by contrary motion. Other people say, no way, just don't even do it. For my money, try really hard not to do it.
Now, there is an exception to this parallel unisons, fifths, or eighths being no good, and that would be in the case of the horn fifths, which is something I'm not quite familiar with. I don't believe.
That's an interesting nomenclature. I think it may be called that because back before horns even had valves, they tended to play this way. And you could what it meant was if you had two voices that were a third apart, and they moved to a fifth apart, for example. But the top voice was moving by step.
Okay.
Yeah. That was okay because it was kind of things that horns did a lot. So as long as that upper voice is moving by step, we're letting that slide. It's also the same thing if you happen to be a sixth apart and do the same thing as long as that upper voice is moving by step. Yeah. We kind of let that slide, right? But if both of them are leaping, like bad.
That just didn't sound...
It sounded weird, right?
Yeah, it sounded weird.
Awkward. Yeah, there's reasons for these rules.
And was that a direct interval?
That was when they're both leaping, we call those direct or hidden. Like direct fifths or hidden fifths, or direct octaves or hidden octaves. Don't do that.
Okay, and for this next one, I have yet more clarification to request of you.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Moving on, the voices should not overlap or cross.
Yeah.
Is there a difference between crossing and overlapping, or
not that I'm aware of?
Okay.
So it is. I think what we're just meaning here is that these voices should never ever. The bottom voice should never ascend above the upper voice, and vice versa.
Oh, maybe that is the difference. Maybe crossing is in the case where the bottom line goes up into the neighborhood of the top line, and the top line goes to where the bottom line is. And then overlapping would just be if it goes on a note.
Or if they end up on the same note or something.
Right. Without actually going beyond that.
But that would be a unison if they ended up on the same note.
Yeah. Weird.
Yeah. And be careful with that because they really shouldn't cross ever. Like, even if they're not immediately crossing, the lowest melody really shouldn't ascend above the upper melody's lowest note. See what I mean?
Yeah.
So even if it's sort of, it went down to F and then moved on, the upper melody did, the lower voice shouldn't go above that F and then come back down, even if it's separated in time.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, right. Okay, we're just trying to get you to write a certain way.
We're in a laboratory.
We're in a laboratory, and these are the things we've discovered in our laboratory over the few hundred years.
But here's the good news, Matt. We only have one more rule before we can actually start playing with this a little bit.
Yep. Avoid more than 3 parallel thirds or sixths in succession. Parallel thirds, like in our Thai national anthem, are great.
Yeah.
Parallel sixths in succession are great. If you do more than 3 in a row, it's going to start to sound like this is just one voice that you've doubled a third above or a sixth above.
Right.
So try not to do that. Right?
Thereby robbing it of its independence.
Thereby robbing it of its thereby your upper voice becoming not an independent voice. It's chained to the lower voice, and it's just an interval above it. Yeah.
Okay.
By that interval.
Well, that satisfies my curiosity. Can we play an example of that, or?
Play an example of
what it would sound like. Well, yeah.
Just parallel thirds.
Yeah, just a quick, maybe play a melody and then do it with parallel
Yeah,
thirds. And
I
then do it
mean,
with parallel sixths.
parallel, more than 3 parallel thirds. I mean, you hear how that's only one thing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Listen.
Parallel sixes would have the same problem.
Can we hear what it sounds like with parallel sixes? Not the same melody, obviously.
Yeah, obviously. So. Yeah. Kind of not this, kind of, you hear how that top melody is sort of chained by that interval to the bottom melody, right? Now, 1 or 2 or 3 in a row, they're your friend. You're going to really love them.
Yeah.
Because they are consonant intervals and can move in parallel motion. So you're really going to like them.
Yeah.
1 or 2 or 3 at a time. Just don't overdo it.
I mean, really, the whole thing that you just did sounded pleasing to me, orally.
Well, that's because it's a consonant interval.
But the fact of the matter is, if we were to do that the entire line, then that would very much be 2 melodies that are way similar.
Yeah.
In terms of their contour.
In terms of their contour and
Rhythmic values.
Yeah, and rhythmic values. Laboratory experiment. Laboratory experiment. We're trying to pin 2 melodies together. Not double a melody in thirds.
All right, man. Now it's time to actually make some music here.
All right, let's see how this works.
So one more time, let's hear that cantus firmus of ours.
This was our cantus firmus.
Matthew Scott Phillips original.
Yeah, well, hey.
Okay, so let us try and write another line based on first species counterpoint.
Okay.
That obeys all of these rules.
That obeys all of these rules. A couple of other things. I'm going to want to start either on the octave or the fifth from our starting note.
Yes.
So my starting note was D.
Uh-huh.
So I either want to start on A.
Uh-huh.
Or I want to start on octave D.
Uh-huh.
I think I'm going to start on A.
Very good.
Yeah. Remember, contrary motion is your friend.
To the bitter end.
Right. I'm going to end with sort of cadential motion. With that C sharp that is borrowed from harmonic minor. Remember?
Yeah, because we're in Dorian, right? Which would not include that C sharp mode.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
A little borrowing.
And otherwise, I'm going to try to avoid. I'm going to try to adhere to all our rules as best I can. Let's see what happens.
All right. And just for my own clarification, just in case is unclear for other people, as it kind of was for me from the get-go. First species counterpoint. The second line that we come up with will have all the same note values.
Yeah, it's going to have all the same note values, yeah, because in this laboratory-like setting of ours, we are trying to create, lines that sound pleasing without any help from any of those other rhythms.
And that's what I'm seeing when I see this 1:1 ratio.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
1-to-1 ratio.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is all in half notes.
Yes, this is all in half notes.
All right. So here we go. So what we heard on the bottom was our original cantus firmus.
Uh-huh.
What we hear on the top is a first species counterpoint line with it.
Rhythmically matched note per note, but there's all kinds of things going on within this that are making it good counterpoint. And I think it was basically the observation of all those rules we just discussed, right?
Plus a couple that we didn't really get into.
Uh-oh, do tell.
Like leaps in a species line can either be preceded by a step in the opposite direction or followed by a step in the opposite direction.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a couple of there was one leap in there in particular where I leapt upward and then continued going upward, but it was because that leap was preceded by a downward stepwise motion.
I see. So
Yeah.
contrary
we
motions
get a
and
little
leaps.
bit of leniency compared to when we wrote our cantus firmus.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
But still, Fuchs would not frown upon this, would he? He would still kind of, all right.
maybe.
Well, he's dead.
Well, he's dead, so I don't care what he thinks.
Okay. Well, that sounded pretty darn good, man.
I appreciate it.
So, where do we go from here, right? Do we just go straight on to the second species, or do we...
I'm going to need a minute to write a second species.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's see here.
So let's take a break. This is a good break.
Okay, well, let's hear that one more time,
Okay.
and then we'll take a quick break, and then we're going to come back, and we are going to
Get into
out
second species counterpoint.
second species counterpoint.
All right. So, one more time. Cantus firmus
In the bass,
in the bass. So this was our cantus firmus.
or in the lower voice, I guess I should say.
I guess we should say in the lower voice.
Okay.
Yeah. Cantus firmus in the lower voice, which sounded like this. And then our first species counterpoint line with that.
Very nice.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Notice I started and ended on perfect intervals. Typically, we like to end a cantus firmus on a perfect interval, and in that case, a perfect octave.
Right on.
Notice that the zeniths of my two lines were in two different places.
Yeah.
Yeah. You might have to actually see the music to really notice that.
And we will post that on the website.
Yeah, there you go.
And then just quick review, the zenith being the climax, right?
Right. Yep.
The zenith specifically being on the high end, like
Right,
the
yeah,
top,
yeah,
the
yeah.
top of the roller coaster.
Right. Yeah. Two different places in those two different lines.
Great.
Yep.
We will be back after this word from nobody. Okay, we're back.
Yay.
And during that break, Matthew was feverishly writing and comparing notes, and we were kind of relearning our counterpoint.
It got intense there for a minute. It got
did,
intense.
It did. Truly, true to composition. I felt like composition was happening.
Felt like composition was happening. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it kind of was.
And what we're going to do is we're going to go over the rules of second species counterpoint.
Yes.
And then you can be checking your work to make sure that it's still, everything abides by such rules, by said rules.
Yes.
And then we shall, at the end of that discussion, reveal the world premiere of the second species counterpoint.
Indeed.
Matthew Scott Phillips original.
Indeed. All right. So the rules of second species.
And before we get into it, let me say something. Let me admit just a little bit of ignorance, if I may.
Okay.
And I may or may not cut this out. Okay, so here's what I kind of thought when at first glance, I saw first species being 1-to-1. I thought that meant the cantus firmus plus another line.
Right.
I saw second species 2-to-1. I thought that meant cantus firmus plus two
Plus
lines.
2 lines.
Not so.
Not so. No. And if you ever take a counterpoint class, you'll do first species in 2 voices, a cantus firmus and another melody, and then you might go on to first species in 3 voices. Yeah. And then maybe even first species in 4 voices.
Uh-huh.
It's probably not much beyond that.
Thank God.
Yeah, and then all of the rhythmic values will be the same. So you'll be writing lines whether you're all whole notes or all half notes or whatever. And they're all 1-to-1, meaning a 1-to-1 ratio between the notes of the line.
So when we're saying the ratios, we're talking about note values.
Right, note
So
values.
At 1-to-1, for every half note, there's a half note
Right.
in the new counterpoint.
Yep.
2-to-1, for every half note, there are 2 quarter notes.
Quarter notes. Right. So there's 2 notes of counterpoint for every 1 note of cantus firmus.
In second species.
And that is second species.
Okay.
Right. So where our original, we were writing it at half notes, And a lot of people write it in whole notes or whatever. It's the proportions that are important, right?
Right. I'm glad you clarified that because I was looking back thinking, oh crap, I wrote this in half notes.
Yeah. Don't worry.
Okay,
No,
good.
it's the proportions that are important.
Okay, good.
So for every note in our cantus firmus, our counterpoint's now going to have 2 of those notes.
Okay.
All right, and so we have 2 notes, and one of these is stressed, and one of these is unstressed.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The note that lands simultaneous with the note of the cantus firmus, landing on the beat, as it were, is what we call stressed. And then that note that follows it, that's kind of between notes of the cantus firmus, right, on the offbeat, as it were, that's going to be our unstressed note.
Right.
So we're starting to have a little rhythm creep into our experiment at this point, right? It's kind of important where they land time-wise, right?
Interestingly enough, yes.
Yeah. The notes that are on the beat, the stressed notes, are by and large going to continue to conform to the rules of first species counterpoint.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So no parallel fifths, no parallel octaves. Unisons, kind of bad. Other things. All of those things we talked about, kind of bad. They will tend to agree with those rules of first species counterpoint. On top of which we have unstressed notes now.
New set of rules.
New set of rules, but also some kind of fun things.
Okay.
Because notes that are unstressed, whereas the notes that are stressed must be consonant, right? Unison, major third, perfect fifth, major minor sixth, octave, right? Also minor third. Whereas the stressed notes have to be those consonant intervals, the unstressed notes can be consonant intervals, but they can also be dissonant intervals if those dissonant intervals are a passing tone. Right? And remember what a passing tone does. It passes between 2 notes that are a third apart.
Right.
For example, if I have G and B, where originally I might be going, now I am free to go. Okay. Even if that happens to be over, for example, E, and our fourth is a dissonance, right?
Yes, it is.
It's okay, because this is a passing tone. Right?
Smooth.
Yeah.
Silky smooth.
Yeah, it can also be a consonant note. So if you have, you can just jump that down to another. You can just jump that top note down to another note that's consonant with that bottom note. So, right, or up. Right.
Nice.
Yeah. Nice. Very, very, very nice.
So the passing tone can be either consonant or dissonant.
Passing tone can be consonant or dissonant.
Because it's on the second beat, the weak beat.
Right. You will hear people talk about another possibility, which is the consonant neighbor note, in addition to the passing tone. So whereas a note will immediately go a step away and then immediately return. So if both the original note and the actual neighbor note is consonant with the cantus firmus, people will say, well, that's okay too. And I say that's okay too. It's just, to me, that's just having a consonance on an unstressed note, which is we kind of already covered.
Right. So now we're introducing a dissonance. In second species counterpoint, we're kind of introducing a dissonance, right?
Which is which is a passing tone.
Okay.
And a passing tone can be consonant. It'll just work out that way sometimes. But it can also be dissonant. And as long as it's in the context of that passing tone, we're good.
And it's on the weak beat too, right?
Passing tone on the weak beat.
Okay, great. Let us move
on.
On
the unstressed quarter note.
Okay.
As always, avoid parallel fifths. From the unstressed to the stressed, so within quarter notes, avoid them. Also avoid them between stressed beats.
Uh-huh.
So from the first quarter note in a measure to the third quarter note in a measure, avoid parallel fifths, octaves, and unisons.
Gracious.
Yes. It's a little tough. A perfect unison is acceptable on a weak beat, but not on a strong beat. We've already kind of talked about it on the strong beat in first species.
Uh-huh.
In second beat, you kind of can... if you really want to, it's still not great.
It's still not great.
Still not great.
Because it sounded like a voice disappeared.
Yeah.
But because it happens at a not such an important moment, it's a little more tolerable.
Yeah. Something like that. Also, avoid repeated notes in second species.
Okay.
Just no repeated notes in second species.
Okay. That's easy enough.
Because it becomes not second species at that point, right? Because two quarter notes together is basically the same thing as a whole note. Now you're in first species.
Back in
counterpoint.
first species.
Yeah. So laboratory setting. Remember, we're controlling for things.
And you may begin a counterpoint with a quarter note rest.
You can, yeah. So you can go just a little bit, have it come in a little bit behind your cantus firmus if you want to.
I would imagine that would call more attention to it as well.
It would, and help you distinguish that there are two melodies going on.
Very cool. What else? Oh, one more. There's just one more.
What's that?
The last two notes of the counterpoint in the cadence may be in half notes. Or in the same note value as the cantus firmus.
As in the same note value as the cantus firmus. Right, and we can leave those. That's just kind of a tradition, I think. I don't even really know why it does that, unless it's just to draw attention to the cadence. But yeah, your last two notes can definitely still be sort of 1-to-1 ratio.
Okay. So, having established all these little conventions...
Having established all this...
Let's see what Matt has come up with.
All right. So, I'm not swearing by this.
Okay.
All right. But I did sit down for a little while. I tried to be a good little Fuchs student.
Got out your feather and pen.
Yeah,
ink.
and write out a second species counterpoint. See what you think of this. All right. So, we remember our original cantus firmus one more time, just for the sake of... So, we remember...
Right. And now, that same cantus firmus with second species counterpoint. Hey, you nailed it, huh?
Yeah. Excuse my terrible piano playing, but yeah.
That's okay. It's an organ.
So that is second species.
All right.
And I think we have probably done enough for one day.
Yeah, so there we go. Part 2. So we covered first and second species counterpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Part 3, we're going to come back and we're going to cover third species and then fourth species.
Yeah, so it's going to get fun. And I may make Jeremy write the next couple.
That sounds like a punishment. What did I do to deserve that, Matt?
All right. Have a good one.
This is beautiful stuff, honestly. I know I'm fussing about it a lot, but this really is beautiful, great music that we're messing around with.
Yeah, just wait. It'll all come together.
Yeah, man. Can't wait for that. And I can't wait to see you guys again.
Stay tuned for the exciting conclusion, coming soon to Music Student 101. To help us keep the lights on, click the donate button on our website, musicstudent101.com. Be sure to share, rate, and review us on your preferred podcasting service.